Hello, my name is Rocco Strangio, and I'm the host of the Law, AI, and Money podcast. I bring on attorneys, engineers, and entrepreneurs to unravel the world of AI and to discuss how it affects the legal profession. Today, I'm joined with Nicole Clark, the founder and CEO of Trellis. Trellis is a tech platform that provides comprehensive AI-powered analytics for both lawyers and their law firms. After graduating from law school, Nicole entered into private practice where she specialized in business litigation and employment matters. Nicole worked on many high-profile class action cases, as well as representing multinational corporations in trade secret dispute cases. One day while drafting a motion, Nicole had the idea to create a platform that organized briefings and rulings in order to help attorneys. She thus created Trellis. And today, Trellis is the leading company for AI-powered research and judicial analytics for state courts around the U.S. Nicole's vision unquestionably changed the way we practice law, and it's a privilege to have her on. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey, Nicole, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thank you. As an entrepreneur, innovator, it's always nice to have individuals like you on, risk takers, forward thinkers. So thank you for taking the time for coming on. Before we get into the tech, could you give us a little bit of background of yourself and then how Trellis came to be created? What was the genesis of that?
Absolutely. So I was a litigator for about 10 years. I did a lot of business litigation starting out, and then I really focused on employment litigation, a lot of class action work. And so I was in state trial court constantly. Employment is almost entirely litigated in state court. And I simply couldn't believe that it was so difficult to access information at the state trial court level. That here we were sending emails around asking for info on a judge when there was real data out there that just wasn't being tapped and aggregated. And, watching the largest court system in the entire world that is fragmented across thousands and thousands of individual county court websites, didn't make sense to me that no one had really created a single source for the state trial court system. And so I decided to be the crazy person that was going to change that. Trellis was born.
You just started off, you were drafting a motion or something, and the thought came into your head, like, this has to
So
be.
the thought came in, I think I moved around firms a little bit. And at each firm that I was at, I watched this, lack of data in general about our judges, about opposing counsel, and really the sourcing of anecdotes. And so for a while, I thought to myself, maybe it's the type of firm that I'm at, or maybe it's the resources of the firm. And as I moved firm to firm, I realized, no, there just wasn't a solution for this. And so that sort of percolated, but the origin light bulb moment for me was when I was writing an MSJ and I was complaining to one of my colleagues that I didn't know the judge. It was a complex issue. I was trying to figure out how to structure the motion. And my colleague said that he thought he had actually appeared before my same judge a few years earlier, but on a really similar case. And he knew what file to look into. And there was a PDF in that file that I never have been searchable. And I never would have known existed in, a firm's DMS. And it gave me the answers. It was a ruling by my judge on the exact issue with the case law, with the way to organize the argument. And I wrote my motion based on that. I won and wrote it in a quarter of the time. And that's where I stepped back and said, hold on, how is it possible that I didn't have this as a resource to start with? That all of us litigators are starting every case in trial court. That's where every case starts and where 99.7 actually die, right? They don't make it to Court of Appeals. They really don't even make it to trial. Yeah. And yet we were operating entirely blind in this court system where we all actually practiced. And so for me, that was where I decided that, something needed to be done. And I went to the only engineer that I knew, the only software developer that I knew at the time, and sort of described the issue. And at first, no one could believe that there was this data that wasn't
Was
being
lacking.
aggregated, and that there was this industry with great resources, with great data, and yet somehow this wasn't being done yet. And we started by just collecting data in the courts that I was appearing in.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I was California, so sort of up and down the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And I used the data in practice, my own secret weapon, didn't tell my firm, didn't really tell anyone, just used the data. And it dramatically changed my motion practice. I mean, I was able to write them faster. I was able to, where a judge was going to say no was almost as important as where they say yes. And can you get in front of those objections if you know what the judge is going to take issue with early on? And after about 2 years of really just using it in my practice and it really helping me to be successful, I decided it was time to take the leap. We had a massive data at that point to launch, really to start in California.
Yeah.
And we went out and I jumped.
That's unbelievable. So if it wasn't for that friend, maybe we wouldn't be here today.
It's totally possible. It's an interesting thing to watch what were trigger moments in your life for various things. And that was certainly one of them. It was like I understood the problem, but that was where I drew the line. That, you know what? This is where something needs to be done about this.
And then you started, when you were kicking everybody's butt, did people take notice?
So my firm took notice. They didn't know why, but when I told them I was leaving to start this business, that's when they sort of connected. She's leaving to start something, and oh yeah, her track record has been pretty great. And so they actually became our very first customer.
Wow.
And that was the sort of starting place. We took the, couple engineers that we had at the time, and we worked on site at my old firm. And we're iterating with the attorneys there sort of in real time and getting beta testers. And so that's the origin for customer number one, was someone who saw that actually there seems to be a benefit here.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Is it scary being an entrepreneur, taking that leap of faith? I mean, you were at a pretty successful position and probably doing just fine. But you wanted to be an entrepreneur.
It's such an interesting question, because I actually think of myself as fairly risk averse. I know that sounds crazy.
I am too. I would say at least.
So, I think I became a lawyer because I was risk averse, because I thought that this would be a stable career. Exactly. And when the way that I felt when I was starting the business was that I sort of looked at what my options were. And my options were, I could try to make partner, didn't see many females, certainly not with families. That was one option. And what would be the ultimate best outcome of that option? And then I looked at this opportunity that I had where it wasn't just a business, but it was a business you could scale to be a massive business. And I saw that potential. And I stepped back and said to myself, will this exist in 5 to 10 years, whether I do it or not? And the answer was yes. I knew that it would. And for that reason, it felt like a bigger risk not to take the opportunity at that time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's unbelievable. I mean, kudos to you. And obviously it worked out incredibly, but it's always tough to make that leap. I mean, I went into law for the same reason. I wanted very, everybody kind of associates it with good paying jobs and stability. And so I was like, oh, I'll be a lawyer. I'll study and I'll reap the benefits later on. But life is not that simple. And if you have an opportunity, you should take it. So I'm glad you did that.
Yeah, what I will say is, I was afraid. I was deeply afraid, and I think anyone that's about to jump out on their own for a crazy idea should have reasonable fear about it. It's a scary thing to do. what I did and it took me a while. We collected data and I used it for over 2 years before I jumped. And that period was where I really validated the idea and the value proposition and whether this was going to be useful for other people. And it took me about 2 years to build up the courage to say, no, this is really something. It's helpful for me. It's going to be helpful for other litigators. So it wasn't I had the idea, jump. I did a fair amount of validating before jumping.
Yeah, you had 2 years to really test it out, and that just
Roll it
made me
over.
even more sure of how great your idea was.
Exactly.
Going into, because I know, when we talk about data research, the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is Lexis and Westlaw.
Yep.
How does Trellis differ from those platforms?
So Lexis and Westlaw have done an incredible job. They are obviously really a duopoly in legal research, and they do a great job at what lawyers have traditionally used for their legal research, which is Court of Appeals case law, maybe Supreme Court case law.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense, right? It's supposed to be binding. What is lacking is the trial court data, that's great. I almost think of Lexis and Westlaw as academic research. And then Trellis as practical. That's cool what the law is supposed to be. What does your judge think the
Like
law
in law
is?
school. We use it in law school.
Yes, that's exactly right. And they indoctrinate you very, very early on.
Yeah.
But I do think it is, Lexis and Westlaw, for a variety of reasons, really did a great job with Court of Appeals data and didn't go after this space. And that left just a massive opportunity. And I really think of it as, even, let's say you're going to use Lexis and Westlaw, you should first jump on Trellis. You should see what other attorneys use as their case law for a similar motion. You should see what judges' rulings say about the case law the judge prefers. Now you have a starting base where if you want to go onto Lexis or Westlaw, you know exactly the cases to look up. You're hours ahead of where you would be if you were starting to understand like what Court of Appeals case law even applies here. So it's still useful to start with a practical understanding, even if you ultimately go on to do Court of Appeals research.
Yeah, that's awesome. As I understand it, Trellis has multiple use cases for different types of lawyers, whether you're a managing partner or an associate attorney. Could you explain some of those different utility cases for those differing attorneys? And then maybe
Absolutely.
we'll talk about how Trellis might be used by businesses as well.
Yeah, so let's start out with partners, and let's start out maybe with partners that are focused on bringing in business.
Yeah.
So Trellis can be used as a business development tool, one in alerting or new case filings, understanding the market, understand in your practice area, what are the cases. It can also be used to track corporations and to track potential clients. Where are they getting sued, by whom, on what legal issues. So when you do go in to pitch a business, let's say, you're prepared, you understand what they're actually facing in their litigation needs. You can see who represented them previously. That's on the sort of business development side. Then let's say you have a client, right? You landed the client, that's great. The next step there is, how do you build that relationship with the client? How do you get them to trust you? And that's really where I think our strategic analytics tools come in. So instead of sending around, or let's say in addition to sending around an email asking if folks have any info on your judge, you can reach out to the client with analytics on your judge. You can say, this is how busy they are right now. This is the types of cases that they hear. Actually, they're not sophisticated in this case type at all, and we are going to need to educate the judge. It's almost as important to set a client's expectations where something is going to be difficult than it is to just tell them, great things about how you're going to win. I think that managing the relationship when something doesn't go as planned is much harder than being upfront with a client and say, look, these are the obstacles that we're going to face based on looking at this judge's data. The other thing there is, as you're planning through litigation strategy, you can look at their motion grant rates on particular motions throughout the case, and you can understand where's the right place to spend your time and your client's money. And that goes really plaintiff or defendant. I think that there are decisions that need to be made based on efficiency and what's really the right use of your time that can be better made based on data.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways I would say that partners utilize our data. So for some of those analytics and really bringing the client in so you can help litigation, you can help strategize together based on some real information. The next step is, okay, great, the partner landed the case, the client feels confident that you're using technology, that you have a good beat on understanding the issues and the judge and the venue. Well, what about the associate that's going to be doing the work? So the associate can really live on Trellis, basically, which is start of the case all the way through. You can, the judge analytics is a great starting place for an associate, but what the associate can do is go deeper. They can say, that's great. I want to see the actual motions before this judge. I want to see the motions that my opposing counsel has drafted on similar issues. Like, what did they file in a similar case? Because they're starting from that as a starting place next time. So you can be super proactive in the way you think about understanding the way the judge sees the legal issue, understanding the way your opposing counsel is going to position it, understanding where opposing counsel might settle the case based on all of their other cases. There's so much that can be gleaned, as well as heavy use case motion drafting.
Yeah.
Utilizing the thousands of years of attorney experience where they've done research and drafted motions and won, that you can start with a sample motion, and not only a sample motion that is on point, but a sample motion that won as your starting place, and really just put yourself on a better trajectory, and associates can get their work done faster. They can bill on more cases, and maybe they can go home to their family one of these nights, right? A little time back.
Maybe partners aren't too willing to change the hours just yet. We'll squeeze more.
It's true.
But that's awesome. The power is unquestionable, right? Like, top down, law firms can be utilizing this from strategy perspectives for partners, and then for just bulldozing legal work on the part of the associate.
Absolutely. And it even goes all the way down to the paralegal, right? The paralegal that needs to notify the partner if anything has changed on the case. They can set an alert, that wants to pull the complaint and the judge analytics and hand that off to the attorneys so they're ready to go, right? So almost everyone at the firm, including just, I know it's this case, I know it's this document, and we need to grab it 1,000 times faster than logging onto a county court website where you have to prove you're a human and it's broken half the time. And, all that time that's spent logging into disparate court websites where you can just have a single source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Attorneys, are you settlement ready? If you're not preparing for settlement from the moment you open a new case, you're already falling off pace. Why wait till the last minute? Using the right SOPs and technologies from day one both increases efficiency and decreases case duration. By streamlining your settlement and post-settlement processes with Milestone, you can free up valuable resources for you and your firm. No more waiting months or years to get it done. You can get it done within days or weeks. Whether it's financial tools uniquely designed to optimize your fees, or transparency-boosting systems to keep you and your clients informed, start preparing the right way, right from the start with Milestone.
It's interesting. I went to a conference, an AI conference, and the speaker was talking about how Walmart actually has an in-house AI tool that they use to gauge values on slip and fall cases. And, with a tool like this, I imagine that lots of businesses also probably reach out to you guys as well.
Absolutely. So we work with some large corporate legal departments for sure. And sometimes in two ways. One, while they're evaluating what counsel to choose, if they're going to outsource based on some real transparency. What are their cases? What are their outcomes? How long do they take, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they actually have experience before this judge? So there's on that side. And then there's where the corporate legal departments actually handle some cases, and they're trying to do more in-house without the crazy outside counsel spend. And a lot of times business will utilize us because they're getting sued in state court. And really, most of the time, businesses are getting sued in state court simply because the laws are more favorable to plaintiffs in state court. And so that's where they get sued. And because the system is so disparate, they don't even know sort of what their entire portfolio of cases looks like. They have one sort of myopic views case by case with whoever they're dealing with outside counsel. And they can actually track their entire portfolio of litigation on Trellis, get notified. They can check in themselves to see the status of a case and understand it without having opposing counsel bill for, writing an update to the client. And they can see a little more transparency in what's happening without the counsel that's handling it sort of couching it in whatever terms that they want. They can also handle more matters in-house because they can write motions in-house much faster and be capable of doing that, as well as really evaluate the case itself, looking at verdicts for similar cases, and making a decision. Is this risky enough that we do want someone handling it? Or is this something that's higher volume that we can figure out based on verdicts that we can settle quickly, or that we can handle moving the case forward ourselves?
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, quite literally, you're decentralizing the legal landscape, giving the information to everybody so that, who's actually right can win these cases rather than who's got more resources.
Absolutely. It's very, very true. And
yeah.
I think that it lives in the data, right? The answers live in the data, and attorneys have been so removed from utilizing that data in their decision making on a day to day. And we're just bringing them back to, this is a resource that you have. This is possible. We're still helping people understand that this is possible, because this court system has been so difficult to access information in for so long that, one of the questions we tend to get is, but how? As a very starting place for what we do.
That's awesome. To stay on the topic of rulings, I've heard you previously mention the importance of tentative rulings. And for some of my viewers that may not be familiar with it, could you explain what those are and why they're important?
Absolutely. Tentative rulings are near and dear to my heart. They're actually how the company started. When I first talked about collecting data, we were collecting tentative rulings from courts up and down California. Tentative rulings are specific to California. There's a couple other states that do something similar, but it should be adopted by all states. And what it is before the judge rules on a motion, the day before usually, the judge will release what they call a tentative ruling. And it is the judge's ruling on your motion, but with the why. They tell you why they're going to grant or deny your motion. And then when you go in the next day for oral argument, you know exactly what the judge is thinking. You know, if there are objections, exactly which to hit with your time. And maybe you basically know what the judge is going to do, because 95% of the time, probably more, the tentative ruling becomes the ruling of the court. Once they've made their decision, put it in writing, it's pretty hard to flip a judge. But even then, you know what you could do to argue to preserve some stuff on appeal. But instead of just looking at that data myopically in terms of this is why my judge granted or denied this motion, the ability to search these, free text search these by legal issue, by statute, by case law, to understand, judges have a great way of getting to the heart of the matter really quickly. And they will tell you what they think. And it's this beautiful judicial thought data that you can use as a starting place in the way you understand the way your judge thinks about your issues, as well as the way that you conduct your motion practice before the judge. Or maybe find out they're actually sticklers on, this specific evidentiary statute. Great to know that before your motion gets denied. So making some of those decisions. Now, I would say that those are specific to California, and I can't speak highly enough. We have the largest historical. I mean, we have the largest historical database of state trial court data in general, but of tentative rulings as well, which aren't kept on the public record and otherwise really aren't available to attorneys. And so always love bringing that up for California attorneys. But let's say you're in another state.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're trying to find some of this judicial thought data? Well, in this case, we have basically a search box that lets you search 4 buckets of data. One is the cases, one is the documents, the verdicts, right? There's various buckets of data that you can search. And in the documents tab, let's say you're in New York, you can look for decisions or orders or rulings and find some of that same information that the judges do release. Now, does every judge give a substantive, well-written ruling? No. But there is gold to be found, and it's not even limited just to your judge. There's gold to be found in other judges ruling on a similar thing, especially in the same county or the same location. There's a lot of cluster ruling that tends to take place in those counties. And so you can be really well prepared just by finding a well organized decision by a judge on a similar issue.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I've heard you mention it previously, this importance of tentative rulings. And it's definitely not something that may be on a lot of attorneys' minds when they think about research. Maybe it is, but there's not that database for them to tap into it.
Absolutely.
How up to date is Trellis on state court rulings and briefings? And how often does your platform re-scrub the state court system for new information?
So we try and be as updated as possible with new cases. We try to have them on, on site same day. We're pulling in hundreds of millions of cases as a starting place to understand. What I will say is it's the magical attorney answer, which is it depends. Yeah. And why does it depend? It depends because this is a county by county effort for us. There is no one size fits all for this data. We have to go in county by county. And we have different refreshing schedules with each of the counties. We also have things that trigger us to go back and refresh a case. We're checking calendars. Is something on calendar? We should go back, right? So what we have in case you just want to be as confident as possible that the data is as up to date as it can be. As soon as you land on any docket, you can press update case and it will in real time refresh that case for you. So even if it was last updated yesterday, but you think something might have happened since then, you can go ahead and click update and it will refresh the case, any new documents filed, any new docket entries as well. So, having this data, both historical, but also new cases and these cases as they're moving forward is so important and so essential. I wish I could say it's done every Friday at 4 p.m., but it's working with each of these counties is really their own beast. And some so we have to have a different schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Tying in the theme of this podcast, obviously about artificial intelligence, but I wanted to ask you, how does Trellis specifically use artificial intelligence to make all of this work?
So we've been an AI company for a very long time. One of the things just at the core, before we talk about generative AI, just talk about AI in general, we bring in this data, and this is unformatted data. It's messy, raw, and in every format someone can imagine. And there's no structure to this data. It's unstructured, and we have to create that structure. And that is one of normalizing this data and cleaning it and structuring it is probably the hardest thing that we do, especially at the volume and scale that we do it at. Mm-hmm. And that's where we've been utilizing machine learning and AI for a very long time in the way we structure and classify our data. So everything needs to be classified. Let me break it down because it's wild when you think about it. So of course you've got a case, you've got the judge on the case, you've got the parties on the case, you have the actual litigants, you have every docket entry For every motion, you have what type of motion is it? Every motion has an outcome. What is the outcome of that motion? Cases have verdicts. There are so many different pieces when you're thinking about one case for the information that needs to be classified on that case, the case type, the practice area. These things are 1,000 different counties will say personal injury 1,000 different ways. And so that's where we have to draw in all this information and really structure it ourselves. And so we have algorithms that we have built for structuring this data and that we constantly are building upon and making better and better. And that's a way that we have been utilizing AI for a very long time, sort of at the core of the way the company was being built.
Yeah.
Now, there's this generative AI buzzword. I don't know if you've heard of it. So what I would say there is that Trellis is actually in a really unique position for generative AI because, as I'm sure anyone in legal knows, there isn't a legal tech company out there that doesn't have some form of generative AI on it right now. Mm-hmm. What I think is difficult with that is that they're all utilizing either just public LLM knowledge or the same data set, which is maybe some publicly available Court of Appeals case law. But even Lexis and Westlaw, they don't have the trial court data that we have. So here we have this massive, I almost think of it as proprietary data. Is it public data? Yes, but it is so difficult to access and so difficult to make sense of and structure to be able to make meaning out of it that it's almost proprietary at this point in the volume and scale that we have it. And so we have all this data to power really unique use cases on top of it that are backed by, again, when you think about these hundreds, thousands of years of other attorneys that have practiced and done a ton of work and how they've argued things and the way to think about it. Or even just, on a county court website, you're not going to be able to figure out, you can't use it strategically because you can't search by judge and you can't search by legal issue and all of these things. So identifying cases that you didn't know exist on Trellis, but then you have the data. You can, great, now I want to summarize this complaint right now. Actually take this complaint and create a timeline for me and a cast of characters so I'm organized. Help me come up with some of the evidentiary, discovery that I might need. And all of that information is made up in all of the parts of a case and then all of these cases at scale. And so the again, going back to the practical work of what attorneys do, their motion practice, their discovery work, communications to clients based on what happened recently in the case. This is all data that we have that we can build upon, that other platforms out there will help with a lot of other aspects of research and probably Court of Appeals research, but they can't do the practical tasks in the way that we can do them based on the data set that we have. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I got to say, Nicole, your company really, really impressed me. And as an entrepreneur, I think you have very unique perspectives on your respective field, as most entrepreneurs do. And so I just want to say thank you for coming on. It's a great privilege to talk to you and get your insights. And I really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rocco. It was so great to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Law, AI, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to like and subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. Thank you.